Whiskey 350.
My name is Jeff Scheller. I'm a Perkasie fireman. I'm at the firehouse, the Shelley's old lumber yard. The lumber 7th and Market.
Yeah.
It's got smoke pouring out of it.
Is it a building?
Yes, it's a structure, big structure.
All right, we'll send it right out.
Thank you.
Box 26-1, fires report North 7th Street and West Market Street at the lumber yard, a building.
I was on my way home on a hill behind the fire scene called Cemetery Hill. And from that elevated area, I was able to see a little bit of smoke coming from the gable end, the far gable end of the train barn of Shelley and Fenstermacher. And I went to investigate. I had my family with me in the car, and I went to investigate it. And when I got real close to the building, I noticed there was a lot of heavy smoke coming out of the lower bay garage doors. From that point, I went to the Perkasie Firehouse to report the alarm.
I was responding from my house, and Third Assistant Chief Rich Barnt got on location just before me. I heard him report smoke showing, and he was telling the first engine to lay a line from the hydrant at 7th and Arch and roll into the scene. I started thinking about all the possibilities, but I remembered that several years ago, I think it was in '84, we had a fire there, and fortunately we were able to knock it down, and it didn't turn out to be much, and I was hoping that's what it would be.
We had fought a fire previously at the same location, and it didn't seem to be it wasn't very much, and this just seemed routine. But the heaviest burn was in the same area that I saw the heaviest smoke when I saw the fire in '88. It just reminded me totally of it from the way we attacked it and what have you. The biggest differences was the wind that we had in '88.
We came onto the scene, and there was nothing but light gray smoke. We pulled off 2 3/4 inches, and the flames were just jumping from one rafter to another above our heads. And the first officer on the truck was Tim Bozzard, and he was opening doors down the line to make access. And I ended up I was the interior attack officer, and I took like 2 lines in. I had firefighters in there with me. And when we got the water and we extinguished the fire in our sector, we had it out. It was on. The steam just started on us. All we had was steam.
I got on location. I saw the truck had 2 1 3/4 lines pulled off. They were starting to attack the fire that they could see underneath. When I got up to the area of the truck, I met one of the police officers from Perkasie, and he said that he had seen fire burning out of the back of the building. I ran around with him to the back of the building, up on the railroad tracks where the train entered the barn, and I could see a perfect burn pattern on the side of the building. And it made such an impression in me that I said, I've got to remember this particular point. No matter what happens, I've got to tell the fire marshal about this, because this is exactly where the fire started. And so that was the first mental note I made in the whole thing. And just as I was thinking that to myself, a real big strong gust of wind came along and fanned the fire that was growing up the outside of the building and just pushed it down the entire length of the building. And I just literally stood there and saw the fire go from, a small area to the whole building.
We extinguished the fire in our sector. We had it out. It was on. The steam just started on us. All we had was steam, and we backed out to clear the steam. And before we were able to get out of the building, it flashed over on us. And it was just, it was like the air between you and me just totally ignited, and it was hell from there. And that fireball came straight down. It hit the floor at our feet, dropped from the ceiling, hit the floor at our feet. And we were just barely out the door. We were actually right at the doorway, and that ball shot maybe 10 feet out of the building.
The fire was just red fire with black smoke in the fire. it just involved the whole building at one time, inside and out. It just rolled out. Actually, there was signs of a third stage burn because the building was puffing. The building was puffing. It wasn't a steady stream of smoke. It was a... All right, so we did have third stage, but nobody picked up on it. The building was so large, the wind was so strong that day, nobody noticed it. That building should have been ventilated.
We went inside the store to watch, and as we looked out the window, we could see the activity of the trucks across the street. And they seemed to have a fire coming out from underneath a rafter. And I went back into the back part of the store because some youngsters had come in, and my wife said they got it out. I thought, well, terrific. It's about what I expected. You know, these guys are very capable. When I walked back up to the front of the store, all of a sudden, the building kind of erupted.
Yeah, so we went upstairs. We went up on the roof of the building, and we were watching from up there. And you know, all of a sudden, big black cloud of smoke just came out of the roof of the storage building across the street.
Burns in our shirts.
Yeah, really. We had burns in our shirts and everything from the cinders coming across the street. And then we saw the flames come out of the top of the roof.
Really?
So,
we better get down.
When we realized that the fire was well out of hand, my wife and I went upstairs in the neighboring apartments. Dorothy Wimmers lived there since 1941. Everything she has, knows, or owns is there. Made sure she was gone. As we knocked and got no response, we realized that she had left for the day. We went in the next apartment, which was my daughter's. My daughter, son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren lived there. Seeing the fire getting very smoky, we made sure all the windows were closed. All the bedroom doors that faced the front of the building were closed. We figured if there's going to be any smoke damage, let's keep it out of harm's way. Found out my son was up on the roof. He was checking out things up on that end, make sure everything was okay. He checked the building out thoroughly. He was renovating an apartment in the back. He had a friend with him. They got down, and everything being empty, we went downstairs to check out what we could do.
The fire became involved rather quickly in the train barn and started to progress to the Moyer building, the 1895 building. And I remember one firefighter coming up to me and said, "We're going to try to save that building." And I said, "It's so hot we can't get guys close enough to save it. There's no way we can save that building." I was expecting that building to have major damage. About the time it was spreading to the Moyer building, the fire itself was starting to create a lot of wind, starting a firestorm, if you will, out of the train barn. And the fire was starting to come across Market Street also, and starting to come very close to the Travel building. I would say the fire was 2/3 the way across the street, just the flames coming out covered at least 2/3 of the street, 2/3 of Market Street. And the Travel building, you could see, just start to smoke, and it was just starting to burn because of the radiant heat that built up on the all the wood area. And the wood just kind of spontaneously ignited. At that point, the Moyer building really started to burn. And I remember as that was the two buildings were burning there, the smoke got so thick and so black, it was just like nighttime. And I'm thinking, boy, it must really be getting late in the evening. Time must be flying. And actually, it was probably only half an hour that went by, if that. So that would have put it about 3 o'clock when I was thinking that. But the wind was really strong, and that was really making things difficult. And I was getting frustrated by the wind. The bank at the corner of 6th and Market, which would have been downwind from the fire, more or less across from the funeral home, the thermometer at the top was reading 133 degrees during the course of the fire. So yes, it was a hot day.
It was hot because, you know, I tried to get back out to my car on Market Street and to move it again because I knew, you know, it wasn't far enough away where it was, but I tried to go towards it. I couldn't get within 15 feet of it. It was just so hot.
Number one, I was concerned about the firefighters themselves, their safety, the safety of others that may have been trapped in any of those buildings. Those were my top two priorities, making sure that everybody was going to get out unharmed.
After we made the connections, I was put out on a corner as a fire police officer. A little while later on, I didn't feel too comfortable. I knew this was a big fire, and I knew that there was some elderly people in the American house, which I resided in, and I didn't see them, and I'd seen some of the other people. I went into the building, started knocking on doors, starting from the third floor and working my way down. When I got to the second floor, I knocked on one door, and the guy wouldn't open the door. He didn't want to leave. And simple to say, the door was off the hinges afterwards. He was brought out of the building, and then I went back in and checked on the landlady's father. Apparently, one of the other guys had came out with him earlier, and I finished a search of did what they call primary search. I just checked every room again, and then when I exited the building, as I exited the building, I remember looking around, and it was total confusion. And about 5 minutes later, I had walked down to another corner. About 5 minutes later, somebody tells me that the American house is fully involved.
I remember when I was looking at the fire, I saw it coming across the Moyer building into starting to burn Leschers. And I know Gene, the owner of Leschers, real well, and Frank, one of the guys that works for him. And right away, my heart just really went out to those two guys. I'm thinking, boy, we got to do all we can to save that building. But again, the intensity of the heat just drove everybody back. There's no way we could really get close to it to get the attack lines in there. The water that we were pouring on the building just seemed to be evaporating more than putting the fire out. It was really just like the fire was laughing at the water.
And we saw the smoke, and we could feel the change in the wind. We just thought best to go down behind the building, and there we met some other friends. We saw a part of the building across the street where there was an ember or a propulsion of some sort go over top of our store and land on the roof of the undertaker. Well, at that moment, they became a priority. And we tried to get the firemen's attention. Hey, there's a danger here. As we walked down the alley, my son-in-law, who had just left a half hour before to go to his mother's, we had called them not from our store phone because the electric had gone out, but we went down to a neighbor, Don Cooker, and used their phone before it went out and got the message through that we have a problem here. And by the time they got over, we couldn't get anywhere near the place. We went home. We realized at this time there's a tragedy. We turned our back on everything that we had built up for 4.5 years. Took all those who we knew were safe and walked away.
I rode shotgun in the ladder. We got over there. We were putting water on the L section of Shelley's building, and at that time we were putting water on it. The roof just burst into flames. It collapsed. When it collapsed, the flames just come to the basket, and we were just totally engulfed within flames and smoke, which Greg and I then proceeded. We ducked in the basket to get behind the fire retardant stuff that was around the basket. Then from there, I told Greg to get us over towards the building to the left of us to keep the basket up because of the 440 lines underneath us. We proceeded over to the roof, and once we got to the roof, we got out of the basket. Greg behind me, we proceeded over to the opposite side of the building towards Arch Street. Then we hollered down to the fellas that were down on the road that we need a ladder to get off the roof. Then I told Greg I proceeded to look for another way down. And then I start walking over at the back side of the building, and I found approximately a 12 by 12. They use them for repairing the roofs, that they can come up from inside to repair the flat roofs. Then I called Greg over, and I said, Greg, we're going down through here, which was above Cindy's dance studio. When I bent over, I got down on my knees. When I proceeded to pull on the cover to take the cover off, found out it was chained and locked. I grabbed a hold of it and ripped it off, chain and all, got it off to the side. Then there was another door below that, which I could not reach because I had my air throttle on my back. In the meantime, I was taking that off. Greg moved that off to the side. And I talked to Greg, and I told him that we're going down through here. We're not waiting for the ladder, because I had looked over again. You could not see the basket. It was totally in flames and smoke. You couldn't even, matter of fact, I could not see the basket at that time. And I then went to Greg and said, do you want to go down first or should I? I said, the last person must get the cover back over the hole. And he told me, then you go down first. Well, I then proceeded down through the hole, and once I was hanging there, it was a drop. I was good 12 feet. It was a high ceiling. I dropped down to the floor, and then that's when I realized I was in Cindy's dance studio. Then Greg then dropped my air bottle down, my mask, and then I pulled a pile of mats that they had on the dance studio, approximately about 3 foot high, and I pulled them over towards the hole so Greg would have a easier fall than what I had. And once I had that there, I got up on the mats. Greg came down. He stood in my hands. He put the cover over. I did not see no light. So far as I was concerned, it was good enough. That way there we would not start a fire in the building if it has not yet been on fire. The room that we were in was starting to get smoky. So then we proceeded to find an exit. He started to walk away from me, and I told him to stay with me. And he started to get a little nervous, which as far as I was too. And I realized once we got to the one door that they used to use it to bring stuff up from the back is a steel I-beam that sticks out, and I told him, don't open the door. There is no landing there. I said, we got to find the front of the building. So then we proceeded down the one wall to the door. We found the door. Then I just turned the lock and walked out that door, went down the steps, got to the next door down at the road. I unlocked that one and walked out. I looked over towards the truck, and she was burnt.
The fire actually didn't jump the street. The heat did, and the buildings were on fire on both sides of the street, and then you had one ball of fire. We knew we were losing the trucks when we moved them the second time. The driver and I, the driver of the engine and I looked at each other and said, we're not going to save this. We're not going to save the trucks. We're not going to save the buildings. And we never had, in 13 years of service, I never had an experience like this.
I ran out of air on my first bottle, so I figured it had to be probably about 15 minutes. Under normal circumstances, 15 minutes. So you're looking at less than 15 minutes from the time I actually put my face mask on until I ran out of air. Like I said, I went out to the corner and got another bottle, and when I turned around, the ladder had been abandoned. And the smoke, it was just black smoke, and orange streaks were blowing perfectly horizontal. I mean, not going up. They were coming horizontally across 7th Street. And I guess it was Bill Barringer who was there with me. And I said, let's go get it, Billy. And There was no hesitation. There was no question. He and I both ran in there. I climbed up into the dead man controls. The way the scope was set, it had to be rotated at least back over center, over rear, before we could even attempt to bring the outriggers up. If we did, we just would have rolled it right over right there and leaned it on the building. And I rotated the turret back around to the rear of the truck, and I could not see the basket. If the guys would have come down, they'd have died. They would have died trying to cradle that themselves. And I can't blame Clyde or Greg for getting out of it, because they would have been killed. And it's just, my arm, I could feel my arm cooking inside my sleeve, and I just kind of crouched down and made myself as small as I could. And I was holding my right hand up, or my left hand out over my ear and my face, and with my right hand extended up onto the controls, and that's where I could feel the cooking in my elbow. And I moved my glove over to shield, and that fast I'd go back. Ended up with blisters on my ear, and I just gave it what I could. And when I'm watching the wires, and through the smoke you could see the big white sparks. You could hear the explosions as the wires were burning off, and they went right up on the telephone first, and the cable company, and then the low voltage, and then when they got up on the top wires, you could hear it. And I had a pole with 3 transformers sitting right beside me, and they burned, not the transformers, but the wires burned off that and came down on the cab. And it was just, like I saw wires all of a sudden. That was it. I was dead. I cooked as long as I could, and I had to get out. And
everything I learned about, in the fire service was when wires come down, you don't trade lives. And that's what caused us to abandon the trucks. We were always trained that you go in, you put the fire out, and that's that. We never had a fire bigger than we could handle with the equipment that we had. Certainly I was frustrated. Absolutely. The aerial piece, even though long after we abandoned the truck, the pumper was still pumping water, and the aerial piece was still in service, but there was no men on it. Until what we think happened was the fuel line boiled, air got in the injection system in the diesel engine, and then it failed that way.
From there, I just proceeded to try to do what I was trained to do and keep everybody on water lines, keep the water lines full, and not realizing it the whole time that this was going on. I found out later that my wife was standing about a block away, and she knew I was on the ladder, but she didn't know if I was in the basket. Like I said, during this whole thing, I did not realize that my family was worried at home. I'd say approximately about 3 hours later, I realized that somebody had come to me and said my son was standing down the street. He'd like to see me. My oldest son. And I proceeded to walk down to him, and that's when it hit me that, here I am fighting this fire. And my family's, normally they always think about you, of course. I've been fighting fires for 5 years, and I never felt like this before. It hurts. It still does.
The fire originated in the train barn, which is located by the tracks on top of the lumberyard property.
And with the heavy wind, it continued to fan itself across North 7th Street to the 5 and 10, into the American House, and the structures on Market Street.
Your building, Shelley's building, their office building, 4-story building, back in time was a J.G. Moyer hardware, and apparently there were other businesses in the first floor of that because they had many doorways, which indicated either they had a lot of people coming and going or there was more than one business there. The hotel was pretty much always the hotel. Its type of usage over the years had changed. A number of years ago, they had really a fantastic kitchen, one of the better eating places in town. Then they sort of got away from that and became a rooming house and a bar, and the kitchen disappeared. But pretty much was always a hotel. In between the hotel and the 5 and 10 building, again, you had some smaller stores that were used for various things. At one time, Cernoff's produce business was located there. The other building, you've had a dry cleaner, an antique shop, a butcher shop. It's a lot of people who have lived in town for years recall that as a butcher shop. Your 5 and 10 building has been the 5 and 10 for quite a few years. Previously, well, still known as Lesher's, previously owned by a man named Jack Lesher. And then from his ownership, it was transferred to Bentley Smith, and then from Bentley Smith to Gene Pritchard. And coincidentally, Gene, since his building burned down, has relocated to corner of 7th and Arch, which was the location of, from various years, of the post office and other stores, and was, prior to that time, the original 5 and 10 location. The one building goes back to the 1800s, and at that time was known as the Hendricks Building, then the Herstein Building, and now I guess probably the Come Travel 2 Building. Back when it was the Hendricks Building, it housed one of the original post offices in Perkasie. And over the years, it's housed various businesses and also apartments up on the 2nd and 3rd floor. You had a shoe store there, which then became a beauty shop. You had a central area that was, over the years, an electric appliance store, a gift shop, a hobby shop, and the last business there was the Treasure Trove, which is an antique shop. The building on the corner at one time was a drugstore where I did some of my apprentice work. It was known as the Sterner Pharmacy. Back in the mid-50s, you had a period of rebuilding, reconstruction, revitalization. At that time, Sterner's moved out and relocated in Sellersville. And since that time, then the Come Travel 2 agency has been in there.
It was a little bit later than when the flames kind of cleared the street and were really burning on the Lesher side of the building that I was finally able to look down 7th Street, and that's when I realized we had lost 2 trucks. And it really knocked the wind out of my sails at that point. I just sat down on the parking lot in Shelley's there, and I had to get myself together. I knew, I just had to take a break and collect my thoughts. And Bob Fravel, one of the firemen, came up to me and said, "Gene, this is the fire that we all thought about, we all knew was going to happen one day. You just happened to be the guy that got stuck in charge." And I'm glad Bob had those words of encouragement for me at that point. It helped me out and helped me get my thoughts together. But that kind of made me determined that, okay, this thing's not going to get the better of the town. We're going to cut it off. And our defense line was drawn at the funeral home on Market Street. All our efforts were concentrated on keeping the funeral home wet, keeping water on there. We laid a 5-inch supply line better than a half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile from Lake Lenape. We were able to use that to supply water to several aerial pieces to keep the water on the funeral home. And at one point we had 9 hand lines, 9 various size attack lines inside the funeral home to stop the fire there. I remember one of the guys that helped out, 2 of the guys that helped out the most really was Tom Huffnagel, chief of Sellersville. He became my water supply officer at that end of the scene. And Chief Paul Stout from Souderton really did a good job of coordinating the attack and the stopping of the fire at the funeral home.
The area of origin was located on the corner of a coal barn or train barn, as it's referred to by the tracks.
At the back of the building, where the trains entered the building, there was an area from the doors to the back wall that had a very nice burn pattern, V, coming up the side, pointing right down to an area. And the building sat on several 10 by 10 beams. And there was kind of a burned out area, really heavily charred. in that one beam, and there was a perfect burn pattern coming down, pointing right to that area as the origin of the fire.
In this particular case, the V pattern, it's what it is called an inverted cone. The narrowest point of the cone would point back to the origin of the fire, whereas the larger section of the cone is where the fire spread out. It was decided by our fire marshal's office and the other agencies involved that we would request the help from Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF. Through talking with the local agent out of Philadelphia, we asked to have the national response team be activated and come in and assist us.
It was kind of funny. On Wednesday when they were here, right about noontime, I had gotten off of work and went up to see if they needed any assistance that the fire company could give them. And right when I walked up there, the guy from ATF pointed to the exact spot I was at and said, "This is where the fire started."
Two 12-year-old boys stand accused tonight of starting Sunday's fire that leveled much of the downtown business district in Perkasie. As Channel 3's Walt Hunter reports, word that two of the town's own children are involved has been met with shock and disbelief.
I have some resentment because the one kid, the very next day, we were up, trying to get close and survey the damage. The one kid came up to me and, nonchalantly said, "Hey, Steve, how's it going? What are you doing?" Right?
Sorry to hear about this.
Yeah, sorry to hear about what happened. And now, after the whole thing's over, I hear a lot of joking around with those two kids, thinking that it's funny, which that I have a lot of resentment because I don't think it's very funny at all, and I take it very personal.
I did lose some sleep, or I'd wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat wondering what I could have done different. And I finally, once I came to grips with the reality that the two boys that started the fire didn't actually intend to burn the town down, it wasn't their goal, they were just trying to be boys and have a good time. That's when I finally realized and started coming to peace with myself that we did all we could. And that's when I started sleeping at nights again, saying, hey, okay, it wasn't intentional, I forgive you, if that's what it takes.
I don't think the kids got the right punishment for this. I don't know how you can punish a kid for doing something like this. I feel more of a instead of community service, which their age, their service is not that, the quality of service that they can give at their age is not that good. I would wish that the kids would just come out and give a public apology for what they've done. Intentional or not. It was an accident, and I think a public apology would be in order here, which hasn't been done to this date.
If we want to be heroes, if the boys have any idea that this is making them a hero, then I think it's going to have to go a little bit more and deeper than, so we'll just have to wait and see which way they go.
And I just hope that the kids would understand that it was useless, it was a terrible thing. And I'd like to sit them downstairs in the TV room and show them this tape one day and hope they understand it.
Someone said, what would you do with the boys if you had them here? And my comment at the time was, I'd hug them. Not for the same reason I'd hug for my grandchildren. That would be a hug for love. I would hug them because I can live after the fire and go on. They've got to live with it. I don't know that I'd want that for myself.
I came on the scene and saw the magnitude of the fire. My responsibilities immediately were to see to the firemen and all those other people that were in the area. I attended to some of those duties and met up with the fire marshal, who then asked me to do a body count, because at that point they didn't know who lived there, if they were still in the buildings, not in the buildings, those kind of things.
We had a problem initially in locating the victims because of the hotel being damaged and destroyed, and through the efforts of the fire company, the borough authority, our office, and the municipal fire marshals doing a diligent job in tracking down the location of all the victims, it was determined that there was no loss of life.
It was a larger job than I anticipated, But what I did, I recruited a couple firemen to set up an emergency station down here at the firehouse, and I recruited people from the surrounding area, some firemen and plus some clergy and other people that I knew, to go around, and we had to verbally broadcast that the people were to go to the firehouse and register, and so that we knew who was where and what, and if they knew neighbors that lived there. So we had a list of people that were in the area, and because at that time they had evacuated more of an area than actually burnt. Probably at least 100, probably more, were displaced immediately, evacuated, kind of thing, because it was a couple blocks around the area. By nightfall, most of those residents were allowed to get back into their houses. They knew where the fire would be contained at, and they were allowed to come back. But 32 people actually lost their homes in the fire and were permanently displaced.
I came from a small town of 200 people, and I got out of the Army and I looked at a map and I moved to Perkasie. And these people didn't know me from Adam, and they all came together to help me in my time of need.
We've got a good community here. The people really pulled together. The firehouse people really did a super job. And the generosity of our town is incredible. If you'd come in here a couple days after the fire, you'd have seen tables and tables lined with food, clothing, toys, you name it, it was here.
Church groups got together, small groups of neighbors got together and collected all these things and brought them in. There was constant lines of cars just dropping things off.
I think maybe you're getting the idea that Perkasie is different. Part of the history can be lost, but it can be remade.
Firemen tend not to be that open and talk about it. And let's face it, they are skilled people. They're trained well, and they know what fires are about. This fire was a little different.
Reverend Waldoffer helped me. I talked to him, which after tonight I will talk to him again.
Standing there and seeing this big ball of fire coming across the street, watching the apparatus where it was located and watching that burn, it had some anxious moments on myself, and he came up to me and he got us all through this, and I feel he is owed a great deal of thanks for this.
But I think that the physical scar is going to be here for a while, but the mental scar is starting to heal, but it's never going to go away. Well, since then, I have dropped my membership as a fire police officer. I am now strictly a firefighter. I just completed school for that. So we're at the point now that I can go out there and not feel helpless like I did on June 26th. Because that was what really got me. I just felt totally useless and helpless, that I couldn't do anything else but stand on a corner and watch my place go to the ground.
We were very lucky that nobody was killed that day, and like I said, I can think of 5 off the top of my head. I can think of 5 people that should not be here. It's just that God wasn't looking at our equipment that day. He was looking at us.
The cooperation I experienced on that scene at 7th and Arch from everybody involved was just super. There's no other way but to say it was a real honor to be the fire chief and have to go through this situation that we did and to come out of it the way we did. I feel very proud to have been the chief and had the assistance of everybody under me to deal with this situation.
I'm just glad to be a Perkasie firefighter. I'm very proud to be. And I'm hoping that I can always be one.